So if you look at the chart, let's begin by taking a look at AD 49. And in AD 49, the birth of the concept euangelion is established. Paul writes Galatians to the churches in Asia Minor and posits for the very first time ever a dramatic new covenant based on the sovereignty of God without human contribution whatsoever, including faith. No human contribution. He posits the doctrine of saved by grace. It becomes born, and the euangelion gospel that contains it is its message. The message of saved by the faith of Jesus Christ without human contribution. Now this concept will enjoin two other concepts that will reshape human history in the most dramatic way ever conceived. It will be most certainly recognized as nothing short of a miracle from the living God, and it will reflect an entirely new tradition of axios tou theou, a new tradition that will be worthy of God under the new covenant. So our first concept is euangelion, but it's a euangelion gospel as a gospel of grace. If we look at AD 50 now, we'll take a look at block 2. We have the birth of the concept of Jerusalem is established, but in a new covenant way that surpasses its previous conceptual significance. James the Just writes his epistle that posits the idea of works that are axios tou theou, that are worthy of God within the new covenant. In his epistle, this is an emergence out of an intense struggle between three separate soteriological ideologies from Peter, from Paul, and from James. A struggle formerly situated in the Jerusalem Council of AD 50, but in an informal way, it was an ongoing struggle that will give rise to many new births within the growing evolution of God's kingdom. Jerusalem will no longer be constrained by geographical boundaries. It will achieve a new incarnation in Ephesus, the central hub of Asia Minor, and it will achieve another new incarnation in Thessalonica as the central hub of all of Macedonia. Those two cities become significant in spreading the gospel throughout all of Asia Minor and all of Macedonia. And we find very varied populations of the citizenship in Ephesus and Thessalonica that resemble Jerusalem. So it is they do become very central hubs of activity in the same way that Jerusalem did. So we have the birth of the concept of euangelion. We have the birth of the concept of a new Jerusalem, a spiritual Jerusalem. And AD 51 we'll now look at, block 3. We have the birth of the concept of a parangelion. Paul writes Thessalonians in two parts in the same time frame and posits for the first time a revision of the rabbinic tradition in the Old Covenant, which he conceptualizes as apostolic tradition. And it will embrace for Paul two foundational truths. Apostolic tradition will embrace the gospel coming in power, and apostolic doctrine, which will empower the actualization of the entire process of God's divine sanctification. Sanctification comes through truth and through apostolic doctrine, and through the power of the coming of the gospel. So this new apostolic tradition will enclose the gospel coming in power and apostolic doctrine. It will include an emphasis within the new covenant of the ongoing battles between principalities and powers, between Satan, or diabolos in Greek, and Christ, Holy Spirit. Paul always frames all of his finite conflicts within this greater cosmological or spiritual context. Sanctification takes place within the greater cosmic boundary of light and darkness. Paul posits an entirely new conceptual understanding of new covenant as eschatological life, living toward the returning parousia advent of Jesus Christ. This becomes extremely apparent in the Thessalonian letters. He posits the idea of the soon returning parousia advent of Jesus Christ. So within 3 years, AD 49, 50, and 51, we have the birth of eschatological worthy living. Eschatological living that is axios to theou. Eschatological living that is worthy of God under the new covenant, because it includes a tradition that will now enclose the gospel coming in power, the euangelion, but it will also enclose the parangelia, apostolic doctrine. And so you've got a 3-year birth of an entire shift in covenant, an entire shift in soteriology. And the Jerusalem Council, of course, was the key pivotal formal moment, but there are many other informal moments that will continue to unfold as new birth incarnations that will occur again, and again as this struggle unfolds throughout the ministry of Paul and other missionaries. But we have a little brief pause here because we needed to take a look at this, because we've already concluded Galatians, but we're looking at Galatians, we're looking at Thessalonians. We need to understand that they are the end brackets of this 3-year period of the birth of eschatological life in the New Covenant. Those two documents, AD 49 for Galatians, AD 51 for Thessalonians, they bracket the Jerusalem Council. They bracket the birth of eschatological life under New Covenant. So we need to have this lesson tucked away in our memory as a context type of a backdrop for our continued study in Thessalonians as we continue to take a look at chapter 4. And we're going to be looking at apostolic tradition and apostolic doctrine in the very next lecture. So that's why I wanted to pause here and take a look at how Paul's ministry was a miraculous eschatological event driven and inspired by the Holy Spirit, absolutely a miracle of God. There's no way that this could have occurred other than the power of the Holy Spirit. We have a dramatic shift in the understanding of covenant, a dramatic shift in Western history, a dramatic shift in all covenant faith understanding. Very dramatic shift, because we have Paul evolving out of the Pharisee tradition that did embrace rabbinic traditions. But Paul translates that under New Covenant as apostolic tradition, and it encloses the gospel coming in dunamis, potentiality of power, that moves toward energia, actualization of power, but it also encloses the parangelia doctrine. And so it's important to understand that while we look at Galatians, while we look at Thessalonians, we're looking at the birth, the infancy, the very infancy period of the birth of doctrine, the birth of theology, the birth of Paul, of his thought. He is the first consummate theologian for Christianity. And so we're watching this birth take place in this 3-year period of AD 49 to AD 51.